Welcome to the Mindful You podcast, brought to you by the Mindful University Project at the University of Rochester. Our mission is to cultivate presence, compassion, and well being by integrating mindfulness and contemplative practices into campus life.
We offer practices such as yoga, meditation, retreats, trainings, and other initiatives to support students, faculty, and staff.
Through this podcast, we share mindfulness journeys and insights on how being present can support mental health, focus, and resilience. Thank you for joining us. Let's explore how mindfulness can transform our lives together. Welcome back to the Mindful You podcast. I'm Rishika, your host for today, and I'm here with Sean Watson, Director of the Spiritual and Religious Services at URochester. Sean is also a current PhD student in higher education with research interests in the spiritual experience of college students. We are so excited for all of you to meet Sean today, and thank you, Sean, for joining us.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah, okay. So tell us a little bit more about yourself, how you got involved with the Mindful University Project, and maybe a little bit more about who you are.
Yeah. So yeah, Sean Watson, pronouns he or they. I have been for most of my career in residence life and housing services as a profession. I was a master's student at the University of Rochester back from 2010 to 2012, getting my master's degree in higher education before coming back in 2022. And so certainly had a lot. I'll share some more kind of just personal life and kind of who I am, but that really framed a lot of my work around mindfulness, around mental health, around student support, because I, in residence life, have been on more than my share of 2 a.m. calls because a student is in crisis. And so for my own practices, being able to kind of come down from or maintain professionalism, maintain a level head during really difficult situations, I've had to engage in mindfulness. And so that's really professionally where I come from. Personally, what my spiritual practice is around being a pagan and a kind of pagan clergy, really involved in mental health, really involved in mindfulness, really involved in presence of being where you are, when you are, and why you are there. So the ideas of being engaged in Mindful University Project, being engaged in Calming You feel really germane and really important to me. The last piece I'll share personally, I have 2 children. I have a 9-year-old and a 12-year-old, and they are chaos goblins through and through. And so as a parent, managing my own emotions and managing my own challenges as I'm navigating preteen children is really important for me to remain, again, kind of do those breathing practices and be a good, mindful person as I'm trying to engage in all these different ways.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's some personal experiences and, just with your own belief system, and then also professionally, you found it to be so useful and helpful with students, and then your own experiences with your family and with your kids. That is so cool. And I think that's what's so beautiful about mindfulness as well, that it can, it just comes to action in every part of our lives, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So how did you become part of, or how are you part of the mindfulness project here?
Yeah, so I've been facilitating Calming University, the 4-week series around mindful practices. This is my second year facilitating. I think this is my second year facilitating.
Mhm.
I joined one of the mindfulness courses during my first semester when I came back in the fall of 2022. And so I knew that I wanted to do more mindfulness practices. I've been doing this work for a really long time, but I consistently find it to be really helpful to be in a guided space or in a designed space for mindfulness because I lose track. I get overwhelmed, I get busy, and as I often tell my students, both in Calming You and Mindfulness Project and everywhere else in my life, oftentimes the first things that fall off when we're stressed are the things that will actually help us be well or maintain wellness.
Yeah.
Because it's I don't need to do mindfulness. I don't need to sit. I can do some work. I can do my homework. I can answer emails. I can do something productive, for lack of better term. And so starting my experience there, I reached out, working in residence life, close partners with health promotion. And so I was like, hey, I love this stuff. I want to support this work. I find this work really meaningful and kind of got connected through getting trained, certified as a mindfulness facilitator, and have been going since then.
Yeah, very cool. So I tell let can you tell our listeners a little bit about calming you and what that looks like?
Yeah,
You can expect.
absolutely. So Calming You is a free course that's open to faculty, to staff, to students from all across the university. You don't have to be an undergraduate student. I have supported staff colleagues. I've supported med center folks. I've supported undergraduates in the arts and sciences. And so really the 4-week course for me is a really good foundation or introduction to mindfulness practices.
Hmm.
And the structure of the class in my impression, and I'm a little bit biased because I like the course, it moves through some of the rationale, the purpose, some of the research behind it. I deeply value the University of Rochester as a Research One institution because we are grounded in, yeah, we can demonstrate some of the value behind this. We can demonstrate the worth of it. And the secular mindfulness practices are deeply researched, are really well explored and understood. And so we talk a little bit about some of the science around it, some of the science around the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic nervous system, and how we can use practices in mindfulness to truly bring our bodies from a state of elevation to a state of calm or a state of just even less elevated. We'll take anything. Uh,
Yeah.
and so through the 4 weeks, I really also value that there's some community built in. There's dialogue rooted throughout the conversation of how was this practice for you? What did you get from this practice? And so it offers not only an opportunity for you to fully engage in your mindfulness practice, a chance for you to talk about your mindfulness practice with other people who may have some similar challenges. I also think it's really good, and even I've had people sign up for the Calming You class and have to miss a class. And yes, you should certainly make time for it. It's really important. The follow-up emails and some of the resources that we as a facilitator, I want someone to be able to get the value of this in any way they can. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing. And I think that's a good
Mhm.
mindfulness practice too, that what is what is, and that is okay. And so even if you can't fully engage or you are coming to class and you're really distracted and you didn't get everything, but I can read the email afterwards and maybe then I've learned how to use humming to stimulate the vagus nerve. Great. I didn't have to teach that to you. You can learn on your own with some resources from me. So, yeah, flexible but deeply valuable as a mindfulness practice introduction at the University of Rochester.
Yeah, and I like how you're kind of saying that like just meet yourself where you're at. You don't have to commit all 4 weeks, like even just coming in a couple of times. And also connecting back to what you had said earlier about how helpful it can be to have a guided practice and just an allocated time in your week to really dedicate to the practice and mindfulness.
Yeah.
Mhm. What do you find students may struggle with or find challenging?
I think and we cover this, and it's funny, we covered this in the first class of some myths around mindfulness. And so many students, I was talking to a student not through Mindful You, we were discussing meditation practices kind of in a more spiritual space, given my job as director of religious and spiritual life. Um, Understood mindfulness as a blank mind, I have no thoughts, my mind is completely emptied, and that's a giant myth. And so sometimes our students and people who are practicing mindfulness struggle with, oh, well, I'm not good at it yet, it's not working, or I kept getting thinking about the next day when I'm doing this practice, or what I'm going to have for dinner after this conversation, and viewing that as a failure, and then kind of the downward spiral. A big part of mindfulness practices is really engaging in non-judgment. And if you are shoulding yourself, I should be better. I should be more engaged. I should have an empty mind. I should be blank of thought when I'm being mindful. All of those shoulds are laying on top of you and weighing you down and not letting you kind of fully soar and bloom and be your best self. And so I think the self-judgment, the self-critique is often the biggest barrier, the biggest challenge. And so that's why often openly share that like a lot of times in my life, the mindfulness practice that I could do is brushing my teeth. That
Hmm.
is 2 minutes. That is a thing I'm already doing, but I can like fully engage in the act of brushing my teeth for that 2 minutes. And I am not sitting on a meditation pillow. I am not devoid of thought. I am focusing in that moment and deeply engaging in the thing I am doing. And that the times when I'm able to do that, and if I'm having a rushed morning, I do leave more grounded, ready to handle the day. And so it doesn't have to be, and I often quote this idea of like sage on the mountain, that if you're engaging in mindfulness, you are this paragon of just calmness, of equanimity, of deep engagement
Hmm.
with the spirituality of life. And no, it's taking a breath. And research shows that one breath can even have a benefit.
Yeah, definitely. I think that is a really important realization, I think, because I think people come in with their own expectations and their own ideas about what it really looks like. And what it actually looks like is just being non-judgmental, being open and curious. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so
And I
cool.
think at U of R, we're so bad, or University of Rochester, we're so bad, and I'll use that language lightly of like this idea of toxic Meliora, that you're never good enough, that there's always something better. And so many aspects of our kind of university culture are really built on striving.
Right.
And mindfulness can serve not as an antidote, not as a check, but like as a balance to this striving. That if you are constantly striving, you're going to deplete yourself. And mindfulness can be a really valuable tool for you to come back to yourself, come back to your body. And so then when you are engaged in the world, when you are engaged in striving, you can be your best self.
Yeah. Yeah, that is so true. It sounds great, Meliora, but yeah, you do need to balance it out sometimes. Yeah, for sure. So, what does mindfulness look like for you? How do you incorporate it in your daily life?
Yeah, I have the deep joy of living pretty close to campus. And so oftentimes my walk or my bike ride to work are something that I'm fully engaged in. I am deeply there. I also think about small moments. I mean, gosh, this semester and this year, this lifetime have been just an onslaught where I'm careening from one thing to the next. So finding, yeah, 20 minutes for a sitting practice is really challenging sometimes. And so it's that breath between meetings. I was thinking about the ways in which I've set up my environment to allow me to have some mindfulness. And so like if you're watching video or engaging, like my office is a calming space for me, is a space where I have a couch over there. I can leave my desk and still be in my office and go sit in a different space and engage or breathe mindfully or do a practice that I need to do. Um, I also think, and this is difficult in Rochester, but one that I will deeply lean on, time in nature. We have a really beautiful campus. The river is flowing right by. I'm gesturing because my window of my office looks directly onto the river.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
I being able to, and as the youths say nowadays, touch some grass. Just
Yeah.
being there, taking a breath of fresh air. If you're able to, and you're having a coffee with a friend, walk with a coffee outside. Do something that gets you out of a building. I think it's hard in the winter when we're super cold, but that might also be when it's even more critically important. I know there are times that I can come to work, get to my office, and then leave this room 8 hours later. And
Yeah.
I've sat, I've been productive, I have powered through lots of work, and I feel like trash. I feel awful because I sat in this chair for 8 hours. Um, and so I think, yeah, time in nature and finding small moments, I think, are the ways in which I've best integrated mindfulness practices in into my own life.
Yeah, I like what you said about creating a safe environment for yourself or creating a calming space. You know you're going to be spending time in that space for most of the day. Um, and yeah, kind of how you said when you're biking, when you're doing like not taking out a specific time, but just incorporating it in something you're already doing, that can be
Yeah.
so useful and helpful. And I've definitely heard that from a lot of other people we've had at the podcast as well, that you don't really have to sit and meditate for like 30 minutes to be mindful. Um, but at the same time, it is really nice to be out in nature to get some time to yourself like that when you can.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've I think even at the relax and renew retreat, I have really enjoyed, and it's hard to find time, but like when we've done sound baths or we've done practices that are 30, 45 minutes, and I can get really deep into that space, I leave feeling so good. I leave feeling deeply connected. And so yeah, deeply value, deeply love, deeply enjoy longer practices. But I know for my life, as a person who is constantly going, not always able to do that. But yeah, when I'm able to, I mean, if I can't get like a person to do a sound bath for me, putting on my headphones, finding something on Spotify, finding something on YouTube, and also being like, I'm going to bed and I've had a really stressful day and I need to get myself ready for bed first. And that certainly includes brushing my teeth, taking my contacts out, but also I can spend a half an hour and listen to this guided meditation. I mean, there are resources everywhere on the internet regarding guided practices.
Yeah, definitely. What was your mindfulness journey like, and what were some challenges you faced on the way?
Start and stop, start and stop, start and stop. I
Mhm.
feel like it's still starting and stopping to this day. And I think there is no linear mindful practice. Um, the and like I said in the beginning, sometimes when we are most stressed, the easiest thing to drop is the thing that doesn't have immediate impact, immediate benefit. I should be writing a paper right now is far more important than feels far more important. Lists or looks far more important than I should take care of my mental health. I should engage in my mental hygiene in this moment. Um, and so, yeah, I think as many things in life, they are cyclical, they ebb and flow. Really, I think some of the ways I started, probably if I think back to the antecedent of it, in high school, I grew up on an organic farm, and so nature has always been deeply rooted. And I've already talked about kind of my pagan spiritual path and perspectives. Happy to go further into that as a kind of different aspect of my life, but the idea of yeah, nature and sacredness and connecting as a mindful practice have been deeply rooted. And there have been times where I didn't sit on a meditation pillow for 3 years at a time. There were some times where I did not know what a mindful breath looked like for the longest time. And being able to come back to that with, and again, I've talked about this before, the idea of non-judgment, not the I'm such a bad person because I haven't practiced this in years, or I haven't practiced this in months, or I haven't practiced it this week, whatever time span we're working on, but being like, oh, what a joy it is that I finally have time to do this, or what a joy it is that I've made time to do this in this moment. And using some of the tools of mindfulness to encourage yourself to engage in mindfulness.
Yeah, yeah, I really liked how you said it's an ebb and flow. I think that is so realistic, and and then the idea that, but we shouldn't be non-judgmental about that, because that's just life and how things work, and you learn and then you're unlearning and then you're learning. It's like kind of like a spiral. I like to think about it
Yep,
that way.
yep,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, and I am curious about how maybe some of your more like pagan background interacts with mindfulness that can often be are often presented as non-secular. And I guess I wonder how what that's like for you.
Yeah, and I think admittedly, I have been a lot of thinking of exploration on this. As a PhD student, more of my classes in my program than not have been around research methods. I am a scholar, I am a researcher. I lean qualitative, but I can readily traffic in SPSS, in statistics, in quantitative research. And so it feels really weird. I feel like sometimes I'm holding, and this is true to dialectic thinking, two polar opposites at the same time. That I am this deeply spiritual person with this really weird, squishy, and shrouded in mystery perspectives of the universe, but also let's write a dissertation on it. Let's engage in the research. Let's understand the phenomena in which we are engaging in. And so a lot of my understandings of kind of my own spiritual practices and being in a really structured, knowable workplace and world and profession have been interesting. And so I've appreciated being in my current job, and I deeply value that Calming You and my Mindful University project are secular, that we are not seeking to convert, we're not seeking to engage anybody in a particular spiritual practice, but these are good, science-driven. But for me, it does open up some bigger understanding. And I've talked with this with a couple different people who also engage in mindfulness. Um, I get in my flow as a facilitator when I can drop in, when I can kind of let my intuition, let my gut, let me trust myself in how I'm engaging and what I'm talking about. In the beginning of my practice, I was very scripted. I said, let me sit down and think and write and plan. And then in my guiding of this practice, hold up paper and read verbatim because I was worried about, am I going to dip into non-secular? Am I going to offend
Mhm.
somebody? But I don't think that's not been a concern that has truly played out. Some practices that I do for my own mindfulness rooted in my paganism, in my perspectives. I think time and nature, already discussed that one
Yeah.
pretty clearly, but if I sometimes joke that like my religious practice is trees. And I'd walking home, touching a tree. That was a spiritual moment for me. I'm good now. I using tarot cards and using some other divination practices has been really interesting. I think tea and tea leaf reading have been interesting and generative as like a human connection tool because you can drink tea together and then there's this like unpacking of the subconscious, and being able to play with some tools that allow the subconscious to feel real, to feel meaningful, to trust the messages we're getting from our bodies, from our hearts, from our minds. If yeah, it feels weird to talk about that in a professional space, but it's deeply valued, and I don't know that I pagans don't have a co-op on the esoteric or the weird and the squishy. I think we can all probably do with even atheists, even those who have a secular worldview, can play with the things we know or the things we trust or the things we feel in a way that validates them and allows us to better explore them.
Yeah. I like how you're trying to balance those two perspectives, kind of trying to be respectful and, accepting and like you said as well, it is a lot more accessible when it is presented in a non-secular way and it's like science-based. But at the same time, you have all these other beliefs and ideas and things that bring you a lot of meaning and joy. And it's only natural to want to share that with other people. But at the same time, it's like trying to find the right spaces to do that and to really be to show that part of yourself.
Yeah, yeah. I think as a chaplain, I engage very differently than I do facilitator in terms of the content, but for me, the affect is the same. And I even joke like as a res lifer, when I still worked in residence life, same affect. Show up with care, show up with kind of understanding, show up with possibility, and be as calm and yeah, equanimity is the root of all of this. Be equanimous through all these things.
Yeah, I was also wondering as you were speaking, just having been exposed now to so many different faiths, being part of Interfaith Chapel, um, we often talk about with other students that mindfulness is so rooted in so many different religions and cultures. Um, do you find a lot of similarities across faiths in terms of like a mindful perspective?
Yeah, and this is truly a like thought through process for me, but like what I have a hard time if I think about it articulating the difference between prayer and mindfulness and ritual, like all of these things, many of the practices around them, from incense to sound to community to food, all of these things bring us back to our bodies, bring us back to something within and beyond us in a way that feels, I'm not using, I use this word not uh, with like divine in mind, but help us feel sacred, that there's something, there's more than the moment. There's more than the things that we are currently grappling with that we can recenter and find strength in that moment of peace that comes from these things. And so, and again, I acknowledge the words I'm using are kind of in opposition to each other of like, oh, it's we're more than the moment, we're beyond ourselves, but mindfulness practices are about being in the moment. And I don't think these are actually they sound in opposition, but they are not really in opposition. That anytime that we can slow down and fully feel, and I use the phrase probably 3 times a week, become human beings, not human doings. That's the practice.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it is so interesting how a lot of religions and faiths are trying to get to the same thing, like you said, connecting with ourselves so that we can connect to other people better and, also thinking about a higher purpose or a higher meaning to keep us grounded. But there's so many different paths you can take to that, I guess. And it doesn't matter whether it's secular or not secular or,
Yeah.
how you look at it or a mix of both.
You might need a secular practice on Tuesday, and you might need a non-secular or a religious practice on Sunday. Like
Yeah.
we can use all of the above. We don't need to be either or.
Yeah, definitely. What's your take on why sometimes people fear adding that sort of like faith aspect to the whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's less so now, but growing up, the adage was you don't talk about faith and politics at dinner table.
Mhm.
That was clear cut adage, like that was wisdom, don't do it. These things are too divisive, these things are too problematic, these things are too messy to talk about or engage with. But I think I'm truly in my position as director of religious and spiritual life, that perspective is the problem. We are saying these topics are off limits. These topics are too messy for us and to even try to engage in, then they became too messy for us to engage in.
Yeah.
We need to talk about these things. We need to be with others who disagree or who have a different perspective than us. And I think when we are trying to share ideas of mindfulness, which again are really rooted in good science, but are also rooted in thousands of years of practice in world traditions everywhere. And so I think trying to hold on to the value of when there's this kind of underground zeitgeist of problematic conversation, of problematic behaviors, problematic aspects of folding in kind of a beyond picture into mindfulness. I I personally worry that I'll muddle the message, that someone won't get it, or they'll think that they have to do something else. And this also kind of goes back to the tension I feel around kind of the sage on the mountain, that there's this like vision of what non-secular mindfulness looks like. And I want someone to be able to be mindful in their dorm room or in their office or surrounded by brick, and that's okay. Um,
Yeah.
and so that tension for me, that's where it sits.
Yeah, definitely. I think there is a lot of tension when it comes to thinking about religion. And as you said, it's not always encouraged to talk about it because we're so afraid to offend other people or to feel like we're forcing somebody in our perspective. Um, but I think there's a way to be mindful on how we have those conversations in itself. And as you said, I think it's important to have conversations like that as well to, yeah, be open and curious
Yeah.
and
And
non-judgmental.
most world traditions have this idea of show up with care, show up with love, show up with concern, show up as a good person. Many ways of defining good person, but that for me is a big root of interfaith that all of these world traditions, and I'll even fold in atheism, I'll fold in secular humanism into world traditions. We're all trying to do our best. We're all trying to be kind. We're all trying to be helpful. And so approaching it from that perspective, for me, resolves or reduces some of that tension.
Yeah. And what's that like for you being like an interfaith director, but coming from a specific perspective, but then now trying to encompass all of these different ones?
Yeah, I think this was before I came back to the University of Rochester or before I took on this position. I was on a panel for kind of spirituality or religious life and environmentalism or sustainability. There was a Catholic, a Quaker, and myself on this panel. And we just kept being like, yes, and yes, and yes, and I agree, me too, but also this because I also agree. And it was just an hour-long conversation of us trying to like more aggressively agree with the other person because we were all in alignment.
Yeah.
And so and that was years ago and almost a formative experience for me. I'm like, no, we're all talking the same thing. It's just different ways of looking at it. Um, and so that's why, again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I include non-theistic, non-deific practices in there too, because we're all trying to work toward the same thing. We're all going through it. 2025 has been a wild year. So much is going on. We're all just trying our best here, regardless of where we're coming from. And for me, interfaith practices come back to, yeah, it's about being kind, it's about caring, it's about sharing, and it's about showing up as an authentic person.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really important message. So, what would your advice be to someone who's just starting off, like their mindful practice? What would you suggest?
Yeah, I think like I talked about, the biggest barrier to mindfulness practices often is self-judgment. And if that is taking calming you and having a guided conversation, breaking down myths of what mindfulness could be, should be, looks like, that's certainly a way. Or if it's your own personal reflections of, yeah, no, I really do. The way we did social emotional learning in high school, and I learned about mindfulness, and I thought it was this, and that's not serving me, or the ways in which it was taught to me aren't serving me. And so, finding your own path and not stopping yourself because you haven't done it. I was talking with some student leaders, but talking about going to the gym. Last weekend, and the
Mhm.
student leader was like, "Don't plan to start, just start."
Yeah.
Because the minute you plan to start, you have an excuse to push it back a day. But if you just like go, and the advice, and I was like, this student just like schooled me on how to be a good human. She was like, Even if it is like go to the gym, do one rep, and then walk out, you did something."
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so I will steal her advice now. Take a breath. Breathe in through your nose, hold for a count of 4, and breathe out for a count of 6, lengthening the exhale. And if you do that once, it's a good practice to start with. And the next day, if you can do that once, or you can do that twice, or you can't do that because life got too busy, and try it again the next day, and not trying to hold on to a plan or a design or a particular approach, that really finding your own way. But yeah, if to answer the question directly, start small and start with what works for you.
Yeah, exactly. And making sure that you're not striving towards anything, just feeling what you feel like in that moment and just doing it instead of waiting for the perfect kind of scenario or planning for this idea of what it should look like.
I'll start January 1st. My New Year's resolution, it will be a mindful person. research shows New Year's resolutions fail by February consistently, but
Hmm.
start December 12th. Okay.
Hmm. Yeah. And what's your vision or your ideal of what you wished, just being part of the interfaith chapel, but then also part of the mindfulness project? Like, what's what do you hope for your impact to be on students and
Yeah.
community?
And I've been a professional in higher education in some capacity since 2012, and was an RA, was a grad professional prior to that. Every year, student mental health is something that comes up so consistently and something that comes up so painfully. I won't go into it for trigger warnings, but it has been these have not been easy. And so I would dream and I wish, and I think for me, COVID and workplace challenges allowed me to expand this perspective to faculty and staff and others that are here. And so I will speak to students because that's what I know and have worked with most, but this goes for anybody with a pulse. Um, I, I I hope for a chance for folks to come down, to recenter, to allow themselves to feel and to allow themselves to feel in a safe space. I think my work within Mindful University Project, my work within residence life, my work as a doctoral student, my work within religious and spiritual life is all centered on giving people a chance to feel okay, to find some health or wellness or be able to flourish while on campus. So if I had a dream, if I could wave a magic wand and have a vision come true, it would be that mental health is held up as important, as crucial, and that folks know how and do get the resources they need for their own wellness.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be great if that could come true. Yeah, but
And
that
these
is a really
resources exist. You
yeah.
can do it.
Hmm. And I think the University of Rochester does offer a lot. It's just, I guess if people aren't looking, then it's hard to find them sometimes. But if you are looking, then yeah, there's so much out there, definitely, so much
We
online.
are all here for you.
Yeah, exactly. Do you have any book recommendations or specific people you like or apps or things like that?
Hmm. Book recs. There is a book, and I'll we can include it in the show notes.
Yeah.
There's a book, The Power of Ritual, and
Okay.
this is not ritual in the religious sense. This book also talks about, and I read it a couple years ago, but I use the foundations of it frequently. Um, there's evidence or there's research that shows like CrossFit communities are taking on power of ritual because it's a kind of shared goal, same space, same people, and so it does non-secular. But the power of ritual is one that I've tried to frame my life around, finding kind of connection points at regular intervals has been really valuable. The other book, and I'm pulling up my notes so I can accurately quote this one,
No worries.
because I use this quote a lot. So it's from we can edit out the silence,
That's okay.
publications. I think I had the book over there and I'm going to forget it.
But yeah, we can definitely we can link these in the bio.
How We Show Up, Reclaiming
Okay.
Family, Friendship, and Community. And the quote that I have always loved, it's okay to ask for help. In fact, by doing so, you are taking part in the divine circle of giving and receiving. While we often focus on what the request means for the asker or the recipient, we should remember that that giving can be transformative for the helper. We have a responsibility to ask for help. Instead of listening to the fictitious lone wolf in us, we must listen to the wolf in the pack. And that for me, that quote encapsulates so much that it to ask for help is not a sign of weakness. To give help is a powerful experience, and to understand that we are in community all the time, that we are designed to be social creatures is critically important.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful message, I think, and so important for people to hear as well, because sometimes we forget that we are part of this bigger community and it's a give and take. And if you don't take, you can't give back. And if you don't give, you can't take. Yeah,
Yep.
that's very cool. I was also wondering, so we had a guest on our show about who I asked her about her tarot reading process and how um it works as like a mindful kind of activity for her.
Yeah.
But I was asking her as well how she conceptualizes tarot reading because I guess there's a lot of and people say, oh, it doesn't even tell the future, it's fake or whatever. I was wondering if what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah. So contextually, I got my first tarot deck at 13. I am currently 38. So I have been reading for a
Mhm.
really long time. And yeah, the kind of divide or the thought process around how we even think about this, I tend to not read as divination, as this is the future. There's a really common tarot spread, like past, present, future, pulling three cards. I tend to frame it as what is a thing that you learned in the past that you can bring forward?
Mhm.
What is in the present position? What is a mindset, a practice, a position that you can think of or be attuned to in the present moment so that you can be successful? And then the future card is what is a way that you should think about or way that you should approach the future so that you can once again kind of achieve your goal, be successful, find the things you need. And so really it's about introspection. It's about like loosening of the subconscious a little bit. The card meanings are certainly are written down. There are books written on tarot, but oftentimes when I'm reading for myself or for someone else, thinking about well, this image caught my eye, or you, the person I'm reading for, have no idea what these cards mean, but what caught your eye? Because that kind of attention tells us something. Our bodies tell us something. And so if we're reacting to an image or reacting to a concept or reacting to a word in a certain thing, that's evidence. That's data for us to unpack and to understand kind of where that might be. So, and there are also, and I, as the pagan chaplain, there are some folks that absolutely read for divination and think about, yeah, this is the future. This will be the thing. I've read for folks before, and I most commonly it's in relationships. I'm just like, if you're asking me about a relationship question, you already know the answer. But you're like, well, I got a boyfriend. The cards say you have to love yourself first. Like I don't know. And so oftentimes I try to like reframe if you are looking for what does the future hold, I reframe it to how do you best set yourself up for the future that you want.
Yeah, yeah, that's really insightful because I think the future can change constantly based on how you're feeling about it in the present. So it's really about connecting with what is it that you really want right now to help you get there and
Yeah.
tuning in back to yourself.
Yep. Because we humans are agentic. We have capacity. We have power. We are awesome. We can do the thing.
Hmm.
We gotta believe. And if tarot cards give somebody a modicum of confidence to shape what they want, then it's a good tool.
Hmm. Yeah, it's great. Okay, so my final question is, how do you hope for your mindfulness practice to grow?
Yeah. I I think I wish for I desire more regularity in it. Um, there's just so much noise in my life. There's so much noise in the world that finding a quiet moment or a moment where I don't have external distractions is really difficult. I, more days than not, I feel like I wake up and I am going until I go to bed at midnight. And I'm waking up at like around 6 a.m. And so just the capacity to to not be distracted is really difficult. I I wish I had some quieter spaces, or I look forward to being able to strengthen my muscle to manage those distractions on my own. If we're engaging in good growth mindset language, I will land there. I think the other space for me, um, as I grow my own mindfulness practice, I'll be a true res lifer, I'll be a true interfaith person that I look forward to growing a community of being in mindfulness spaces, that it's not just me. And so if to kind of to respond to my last wish, like it's easier to not be distracted when you're all working toward together and toward one thing or toward the same goal or in the same space with the same things. And so, yeah, I look forward to finding opportunity, and I look forward to continuing to grow opportunities that I've had to be mindful with and not just on my own.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that reminds me of what you were saying as well for your vision for students is creating that safe space and where people can kind of fall back on each other and not afraid to ask for help or can have others to hold them accountable even. Um, yeah. And I think it is hard as because, I know you have so many different commitments and like you were saying that sometimes life gets busy and you just have to adjust and then you can come back to the practice when things slow down.
Yep, the practice is always there because the practice often is the breath.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Well, do you have any final things you want to leave with our listeners?
No, I think if you listen to this whole thing and are have forgotten everything but are taking one lesson, I hope that listeners leave with non-judgment, because that for me is often the biggest barrier. That start with what you start with, and what you start with is exactly what you need to start with.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. We really enjoyed having you here.
Of
And
course, I love
yeah,
being here and I love talking about this.
yeah. Okay. Bye.
Yeah, bye.